So we were talking off air. So you graduated 4 years ago from
4
here.
years ago, yeah.
All right. So walk us up to what are you up to right now?
So currently, I work as a senior data analyst at a digital advertising company, and I've been there for about a year and a half almost.
Okay. So you're doing marketing analytics essentially,
And yeah, essentially.
right? That's because it's interesting because title kind of doesn't matter.
No,
Like
I don't think
I
it
was actually
does.
just talking with Molly, our mutual friend, about analyst has become very diluted. Like
Mhm.
analyst is kind of a catch-all term, but if you're a data analyst for a marketing company, of course you're looking at marketing data.
Right.
So walk me through that. Like what kind of data sets are you looking at? What are the metrics? Like how do you analyze that?
Yeah, so there's one of the big things I work on is what we call an MMM, which is a media mix model, because we have media that we advertise on from like all sorts of platforms, like social media, um, to print, to direct mail, to email. And then what we're trying to do with like MMMs is like trying to figure out how all of those interplay, and how that affects like conversions and all the other KPIs that a company might be looking at. So the data is not super messy, but obviously all data is somewhat messy, and then you have to just find a way to bring it all together and put it into a model and get some results that can tell the story of what your marketing dollars are doing for you.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you said model. When I went like talking with you, I pictured you were doing more like kind of like Tableau or Power BI
I
dashboard
do
work.
that too.
Okay, so
So,
what's the difference between the two?
um, so I would say I'm kind of in like a unique place right now in my role in where I I started as a contractor to do just dashboard visualizations for a specific tool in Salesforce. It was very niche. And then I kind of sought other opportunities within that role because they would kind of say like, "Oh, we're working on this," and I would just kind of express interest or express that I had experience in that. And so other teams would kind of pull me in when they needed help because, in most companies like every team gets overwhelmed at some point. And so I would kind of be like a floater, and get pulled into all these different projects, just because sometimes I wasn't necessarily an expert, and I would just be like, yeah, I'm really good at this, even if I wasn't, because
Yeah,
I know I'm a fast learner and I wanted the experience.
that's great. So it sounds like over the last 4 years since you've been working, you've gained quite a bit of confidence. Like
Yeah,
you feel like you can go and learn
for sure.
a new like. I mean, are you? What are you learning mostly? Is it new kind of business use cases or tools or some type of combination of the two?
I think definitely like learning a lot of technical skills along the way. A lot of like with for like data visualization. I think a lot of it like yeah, sure you can take like courses on it and do all these things, but until you're actually visualizing real data, you don't really know, and you're presenting it to people, you don't really know like how people are going to digest it
Right.
until you're like actually doing something that is impactful.
Yeah, having a use case makes learning.
Mhm.
Well, I feel like what it does is it just clarifies the path of like,
Right.
okay, here's the output that I need. I'm getting paid for this. If I don't deliver on this, and that happens, maybe on a repeating
Yeah.
process, I'm going to lose my job. So there's kind of
Right.
like a baked in pressure. And I feel like the pressure is different because when you were in my class, like, I don't think you were like, oh no, I need to solve this problem or I'm not going to pass the class. Like, it's a different dynamic,
It's
right?
a different dynamic. I think when like in class, obviously like I was always someone who wanted to get a good grade.
Right.
So it was like I did feel some sort of pressure, but yeah, it's obviously different in the workplace. Like it's a different sort of pressure. Um, I think in class you more so it's like easier to just kind of rely on like more like textbook book stuff or like stuff that you learn in class
There's
because
hand
it's
holding.
yeah, it's like a lot. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
hand holding. There's like a rubric for things versus like when you're actually in the role, like you would think you would get more direction, but you really don't. It's kind of like here's the data,
Right.
you
Well,
know.
and that I think what we're kind of starting to circle around as a topic was the concept of critical thinking.
Mhm.
Like all across education, they say critical thinking, but it's really hard to incorporate that into a class
Hmm.
because like if you have a textbook and then you have everything kind of like spoon fed into a structure, that's not critical thinking.
Right.
That's just being kind of
Well,
obedient or
yeah, or like following
or
directions.
detail oriented
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. Like I know like when doing like the minor here with in business analytics, we did a lot of like stuff with real data versus just
Yeah.
like maybe in other classes we would use literally like the data would come from like the digital textbook and you could download the file and then do something with it. And it doesn't translate that well into
Right.
when you're actually doing work in the field.
So one of the things that you said earlier on in the conversation I thought was really interesting and I wanted to circle back around was for the current role that you're in, you got hired as a consultant then
Contractor.
or contractor, and then you started working on projects that were slightly outside of the scope of that. Then they eventually reached out to you and said, "Hey, we want to bring you on full time."
Right.
And I think what you've done is you've built up a lot of like I don't even know what to call it, like business capital or knowledge of what's going on within their business.
Right.
So if they're trying to hire a full-time role, you've worked for them for a year and you've touched multiple aspects of their business,
Mhm.
you're going to start out 6 months ahead of somebody applying cold from LinkedIn or
Right.
Indeed. Um, so I think that was a really, really. Did you do that intentionally, or were you just like, I'm curious about this. I want, I'm bored
Yeah.
at work. I want to work on something else, or here's an opportunity.
Yeah, I think I saw the opportunity. Somebody had reached out to me via LinkedIn and it sounded interesting and it was paying more than what I was making at my previous role. And that honestly was one of the biggest like motivators for me. And I was hesitant because I did like my previous role, but also I was like, okay, I'm super early into my career. Like
Yeah,
it's
you
not
got
gonna
time.
hurt me. And also like I wasn't the ability to contract because obviously when you're contracting you don't have those like full-time benefits.
Right.
um, so I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I could take a contract role because my benefits were under like my husband's, so like that also kind of played into it as well
Yeah.
because
So
I
you're in like a
understand.
pretty stable
Yeah,
economic
because I
position.
understand not everybody can just like jump from a full-time to a contract not knowing if they're going to get hired
Right.
full-time. um, but doing that and like kind of just taking that leap of like I guess like faith it played out well in the end.
Well, it sounds like the contracting role is a big opportunity, but you really maximized it
Yeah.
because not only did you do that core job function, but you were starting to do things kind of slightly outside of what was going on. I guess the word that's kind of popping into my mind, which I'm totally making up, is like you built up quite a bit of career equity within that year of contracting.
I would say so, yeah.
Um, because are the projects that you're working on now, are they starting to span, like, multiple aspects of the business or
For sure. Yeah, like, especially, like, the MMM work, it's, like, slowly trying to expand into other clients that we have, like, it kind of started with a few clients, and now it's, like, broadening to other clients, to, like, pick up more business and things like that.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a funny topic for me. I think you're probably more technically savvy than I am. Like, I'm 35, you're 25, so I got 10 years on you.
26 now.
26,
Yeah.
okay. So I got 9 years on you, but I feel like you know more about technology and, aren't you coding in Python and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do a little bit of Python coding. Yeah, I would say like I've had to pick up a lot more technical skills, like in the role that I am now, which is also something that I wanted because I've always been interested in getting into those more like technical roles.
So could you say some more about that? Like, what was the first technical thing you ever worked on? And then how do you go about developing those skills? You just go online and like Google or YouTube or whatever?
Yeah, so I use a lot of ChatGPT, honestly, to just kind of
Okay.
like trial and error stuff. I think like I can't really recall like the first like super technical thing. Um, Maybe just like for dashboards using like JavaScript and like HTML
Okay.
and a lot of that.
I haven't touched either one of those,
Yeah,
so
so I did take like a JavaScript class in in college as part of my major. But outside of that, I hadn't like touched it. And then in the role when I was contracting, I had an opportunity to do that. Well, actually, one of my first assignments was, can you like develop this in the dashboard? And previously, like people were like, oh, I don't think it can be done. Like it probably can, but it just takes like a lot of like manual coding in the back end.
Mhm.
And I was able to figure out how to do it using like HTML and JavaScript, even though like I hadn't used those tools before, like in like a work setting.
Okay, so that was within the Salesforce dashboard?
Within the Salesforce dashboard.
Okay, because are you working in Tableau now? Because Salesforce acquired Tableau, right?
They did, but I work with Datarama, which is
Okay,
similar to Tableau in a way. It's like a different,
Datarama.
yeah, it's what
That's a
it's called. Well, now it's called Sales. It's had many names, but it was Datarama, and now it's technically Salesforce Marketing Intelligence.
okay.
Yeah,
Have you worked with Einstein? Is Einstein's like the
like the
AI
Einstein
within?
Insights.
Yeah.
We like it has a feature. I don't really use that very
Okay.
much, but I mean I know it's there. But
Yeah.
lately I've been doing more and getting slowly. I actually just was put on a different team
Okay.
this past week, and I will be starting on a new team on Tuesday. Um, and I will be doing a lot of Power BI work moving forward.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I haven't worked on Power BI stuff, and man, it's been like 8 months now. I
Okay.
miss it.
I know the first Power BI stuff I technically did was like in your class.
Yeah.
And then I know those video tutorials of me doing stuff on it are still
Right.
on YouTube somewhere.
You had those big
Yeah.
glasses.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the class. Let's almost do like a retrospective of
Mhm.
4 years ago. I How did you find out about the class?
Mhm.
I guess let's start there.
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember how I found out about it because I was a math major.
Yeah.
And then my original like trajectory was I wanted to do actuarial science.
Right, I remember that.
I wanted to be an actuary after I graduated because I wanted to use math
Mhm.
and it just made sense, I guess. And then it was, I think, before my senior or junior year. I can't remember
It
now.
had to be your junior year
It
because,
was
like,
junior year, yeah.
yeah.
It was before my junior year. I think it just, somebody announced it about the analytics minor, and I just had like space in my like schedule, like
Yeah.
enough courses, because I was almost done with my math major. Like I technically could have graduated, I think, a year or a semester early, but I chose to just do the analytics minor just to see, what it was about.
Right. Well, I mean, actuarial and analytics sounds like somewhat related or similar.
Yeah, I guess I never really got into the actuarial stuff enough to really
Yeah.
know what it was about. But I do
Gotcha.
know they use like Excel a lot, so
Okay, so then you showed up in my class and you were
Mhm.
like, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah, pretty much. Because it was your class, and then it was can't remember what the name of the other classes were, but
So it's case studies in business analytics, and then the capstone course where you actually. So I was consulting at the time, and I believe you got to work with Oliver Sales and Marketing, which
Mhm.
was
Yeah,
a client of mine that I had for 6 years.
yeah,
And yeah, actually, I mean, I think we can talk about that project a little bit. I mean, don't get into the. I was going to say, don't get into the specifics. It was 4 years ago. You don't
yeah. I was
remember.
like, I don't remember.
You don't remember the specifics,
No.
but yeah. So, what was the? I guess let's start with the case studies class. So, what did you kind of get out of that?
I would say I got a lot out of it in terms of like just skills that I could present in an interview
Right.
to like, present myself as like somebody who could do a job.
Well,
Um,
because I believe even back then, because I've changed, I've kind of iterated a little bit, but
okay,
I don't think I gave you a final. I think your final was a portfolio, right?
right, that's correct.
So it's
Yeah.
like you can literally say, "Here's the work that I've done,"
Mhm.
and yeah, I think that really helps you kind of stand out in the
Right. Yeah,
marketplace.
just having like showing that you
Right.
can do stuff with the data. Yeah, because prior to that, prior to those to the analytics minor, like obviously, like I learned a lot in my math courses, stuff that I use today, like just the math.
That's it. A math degree is like a degree in problem solving, right?
Yeah, I mean, essentially,
Yeah.
I would say so. Yeah, it develops those problem solving skills, um, but also it can be very just like academia,
Yeah.
like when you show up to an employer and you have a math degree and you haven't done like any,
So it's like theoretical versus
yeah,
practical.
theoretical versus practical. Like obviously, it's like I understand all these like mathematical concepts and all these things, but I think it wasn't until the analytics minor where I had something where I could go into like a data analyst job interview and show them like I can
Right.
do something that will be of value to the company,
Right. I mean, it's kind of like it's almost like the STAR methodology of
Mhm.
it gives you like a very concrete situation, like a task, a problem to
Yeah.
solve, an action you took, and then the result,
Yep.
or the recommendation. Um, giving that framework, I think is really, really,
Yeah.
I mean, getting a math degree and a minor in analytics, I feel like that's a great combination right
Yeah,
there.
I think it served me well so far. Yeah, I think without it, I'm not really sure if I would have been able to really land like my first job, honestly, just because like it kind of was the interview was kind of like heavily on like, oh, what projects have you done? Because obviously they knew I was straight out of college,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so I didn't have any job experience. And so being able to talk about like, oh, I worked on the data for this company, it was like, who's a real company,
Right.
is a real data set, gave them real actionable results and got real feedback from someone was like something that I think made me stand out probably from a lot of other people coming out with a college degree.
Oh yeah, especially like entry level people,
Hmm.
because we actually talked about this in class yesterday of going and applying for like I have a systematic way that I look at applying, and I have to kind of remember and put myself back into that situation of like you're coming fresh out of school, you don't have it, you might have like a part time job,
Hmm.
and you might have a few projects under your belt, but it's not like I'm 8 years into my career at this point, so I can apply to a wide range of jobs
Right.
versus looking for those entry level jobs. It kind of thins the herd quite a bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, any type of like leg up you can get, I think is very valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
So it is kind of cool that you even while you're on campus here, you got your first exposure to marketing.
Right.
So I mean, I know this was 4 years ago, but like, what do you remember of that experience?
I remember it being like a team work thing,
Yeah,
which I wasn't necessarily used to in my other classes.
I bet math is like a pretty solitary.
Right.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah,
solitary. So it was very much like working, with other people in my team and seeing how they saw, um,
yeah.
I guess, like the data and the output, and then kind of like just that dynamic of spreading the work and just working in a team really was like the thing that sticks out to me the
That's
most. I don't know
interesting because
why.
I didn't think that would be the big benefit. I thought the big benefit would be like you got to work with the president of a pretty large company,
Yeah, that too, of course.
and it's like you're solving a problem that hasn't been solved before.
Right.
Like they're launching a new like sector of their business,
Yeah.
and they don't. There's no like. It's not like 2 + 2 = It's not. I mean,
Right.
I know that's just super kindergarten math,
I know,
but
but
like,
I get what you're saying.
but there's no like right conclusion,
Right.
and I think that's what is really challenging to teach a lot is the complexities and the assumptions you have to make because like you're never gonna have a perfect data set.
Right.
Like right now I'm working in the grocery business. I mean, think about all of the pressures. Like I mean, we had that big storm that came through.
Right.
Like one of our stores out in Nashville is completely wiped out. So like all the sales from that. But then also too, like there was influenza within the chicken. So like the egg sales are different.
Right.
Like there's so many different things, and that's a skill set into itself of being able to kind of cut through all the noise and say, you know, to the best of my ability, or it could be I am 95% sure this is the right answer.
Right.
Because I mean, within marketing, the role that you're doing now, like how do you deal with ambiguity or making assumptions?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously like a lot of outside variables that affect like any buyer's decision. Like you said in the grocery business, like
Right. Yeah.
you literally never know what's gonna happen. Um, and yeah, I think in marketing it's the same, and I think we saw that in the capstone. I think I remember like all of us having a lot of questions about the data. I do remember that
Yeah.
because we were all like obviously like unfamiliar with the business, as opposed to maybe somebody who would be working there and like maybe be
Right.
more familiar with it. We were just like students. Um, but yeah, like I think in like the world of marketing now, it's like the way we deal with it is kind of like using a lot of past data,
Right.
to kind of just try to predict in a sense, and also to just understand the data that we see that comes in like on a day to day or like a weekly or monthly basis. Um, but I mean, you really just can't predict a lot of things. Like it is very unpredictable in every sector.
Yeah. I mean, it's just something that I don't think it's going to go away in your career. Like you're
Right.
going to have to deal with ambiguity, and having a class that kind of introduces you to that. And
Yeah.
because you could come reach out to me, and like I could kind of help you at least. I'm not very. I don't think I'm very prescriptive. I'm not like this is the right answer. It's
Right. Because
like
there is no right answer.
right.
Right.
Yeah. You're trying to do the best you can with whatever assets or whatever resources you have
Yeah.
at your disposal.
That can be hard, I think, as a student, because when you're a student, you're kind of your most of your academic life is kind of like, okay, here's like the right answer, or like this is what a good paper is if you meet all of these things or check all these
Right.
boxes, and versus working with like actual company data. Um, and yeah, I think it was a good thing to learn.
Do you want to talk about the like transitioning from a student to getting your first job?
Okay.
Because I remember you were like quite stressed about
Yeah, and
that. I mean, we don't have to
yeah.
talk about that if you don't want
No,
to.
it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the transition from being a full-time student to working. Because that was a pretty big challenge, right?
Yeah. Looking back at it, I think I was definitely more stressed out than I needed to be. But also
Right.
I'm somebody who just like stresses about everything.
Well, I think you're used to like having like doing exceedingly well and having things like kind of go well for you, right?
I think there's yeah, like a lot of things have been like if you do this, this will happen,
Right.
right? Like if you do well in high school and you get good grades and you'll get into the college you want, or like be able to, do X or Y things. Um and then going out and like try to find a job, it's like you're not guaranteed to find the role that you want or the salary that you want.
Right.
Um
Because if I'm remembering correctly, you applied for like 6 weeks and didn't hear anything back,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden, you got multiple interviews in 1 week, right?
Right. Yeah, so it was strange. I would remember I would apply to a bunch of jobs and either not hear anything back or just get like a rejection.
Right. Which both of
Which
those are
yeah,
demoralizing.
they are. It's like it's hard to
Yeah.
constantly, feel like rejected. And then I remember finally like landing a couple interviews, and then some of them like they wouldn't disclose the pay right away. And sometimes the pay would just seem really low, even as somebody like entry level. I would just kind of think like, oh, that's like really low,
Yeah.
for somebody with what I felt were, pretty valuable skills.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to come off as like elitist or anything, but like you were coming into a market as a skilled laborer.
Hmm.
It's not like you were a replaceable cog. Like
Yeah.
there are specific skills that you have that not a lot of it's not a very high percentage of the population has that.
Yeah, I think now it's a little more saturated, especially, but I think back
Yeah,
then, like 4 years ago or 3 years ago now.
that's true. I feel like I've been teaching for the past 4 or 5 years, so I've kind of been following the market trends,
Mhm.
and it was interesting because yeah, it was a really good market when you came out,
Yep.
and then it was good for another year or two, and then I would say about a year or two
Mhm.
ago, the market just fell out. Like
Right.
there were a ton of people trying to get in, and there just were not very many entry level jobs.
Right.
That being said, like if you had kind of gotten like the time that you got in, now it's like these mid to senior level roles are just wide open.
Yeah.
So it's like it's really congested for entry level, but then you go up. And also too, like you've got assets now. Like you've got experience working, You know, what was that first role you got? Was it marketing
It was
facing?
also marketing.
Yeah, so, like,
Mhm,
you have a pretty deep understanding of marketing at this point, like, you've been working in it for years.
mhm.
So it's not like I mean, that is very, very valuable.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think when you are in the same, like, t space,
Right.
you gain a lot of, like, that business knowledge that most people just don't have because if there's no real way to get that knowledge unless you're actually working in the space. Like, I think
Right.
you could even have, like, a marketing degree and not actually know what's going on at a digital media agency.
Well, it's the theoretical knowledge versus the
Mhm.
practical knowledge,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because you were talking I don't know why this just, like, kinda sprung into my head, but you were talking about, like, understanding business. There's also another component of, like, what you did in the current role when you were going and getting those other projects.
Mhm.
There's organizational knowledge too. So
Yeah.
you know the people, you've built some type of relationship, there's some trust established. So what essentially what you've done in the role that you're in now is you've built a lot of trust. Like have you ever like kind of thought about that of like there's
Yeah.
value in that, right?
Yeah, and I'm realizing that I think very recently is like I've realized that um is as I've been working through different teams within my organization, I think working with different like project managers, different heads of teams, I've gotten to know my work and have gotten to know just like I guess who I am as like a colleague, and that I am very reliable and that I do deliver good work. And so I think word of that gets around, and I think that just being somebody who is willing to take on different types of projects that are maybe outside of my like very specified role, um, like puts me in that situation.
Yeah, and also too is the term that's coming to my head is like stranger danger. Like you're a known entity to them.
Hmm.
So like there's a track record of like okay, well, Christina's done good work, so it's
Hmm.
accurate, it's done on time, but she's also pretty flexible. She's like open to, um, stretching a little bit.
Hmm.
She's also a hard worker. Like that personal relationship is really valuable, and I feel like a lot of people, especially nowadays with like Indeed and LinkedIn, and I mean, there's almost this like Tinderification of the job market.
Hmm.
Like, I applied to 196 jobs in 2 weeks when I was looking back 8 months
Oh
ago.
wow. Okay.
Because, like, I can go on and it takes 5 seconds to do a one-click LinkedIn
Yeah.
apply. I mean, it's essentially like swiping left or right on a dating profile.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so much noise that happens within that, and so like, it's funny 'cause you know, Tinder came out after I was an undergrad, but it seems like it's people are so frustrated with you said you've got a friend that's hates the apps now.
Hmm.
That's single, and it, it's just a mess. That
Yeah.
same kind of effect is happening on the job market.
Right.
Um, yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool that most people don't really think about that, like the equity that you're building within these relationships.
Yeah, I think before I did also consider like that whole like job hopping aspect of things.
Yeah,
Um, but also I think when that was becoming trendy, it was a very different job market. Like right now,
right.
people can't really afford to go into to like just quit their job and go into another one because like you realistically never know if that role is going to be like long term. Like they could literally cut you whenever if they don't think you're a good fit. Like if you go into a new
Right,
role and they're
yeah.
like, yeah, actually they're really not a good fit. Like they could just fire you if they wanted to. Versus like if you're I mean, obviously in my role they could fire me whenever they wanted to as well. But I think there's obviously more of a risk in job hopping um
Yeah,
in
but to push
today's
back on
market.
that, like, they could fire you whenever they want, but if you think about it, you've worked at the company, what, for 2 years now?
A year and a half.
They they would be losing all of the knowledge that you've gained, specifically within their business and how it plugs into the broader market, what are the problems that they're facing and
Yeah.
how you can proactively solve them. That, like, intuition that you've developed,
Hmm.
like, that's valuable to them, and I think that they're aware of that. Um, so, yeah, but on the flip side of that, there's some people who stay in jobs too long,
Right.
and it's bad.
Hmm.
So, I feel like I've been hearing a lot of one side of the argument, not really kind of like struggling with the nuance of both.
Yeah, I think definitely there's nuances to both because I mean, you can stay in a role for a while. Like obviously if I'm in my role and then um I don't get like the pay increases that I feel like I should be getting, then yeah, maybe that's a sign that they're not valuing you as an employee and that you should go elsewhere.
Right.
Um, but I think if you can continue to grow and like, if you have growth opportunities within the company, I think that's different. Because like, obviously, if you're just like stagnant and you're not learning anything new and you get kind of bored, then yeah, maybe you should maybe job hop if you want. But
Yeah, and it's also so like individualized, right? Like
mhm,
learn it sounds like one of your big values is that you want to grow and you want to learn.
mhm.
But what if Susie Q over here just had a child
Right,
and has a young family? Like that's its own set of challenges and
right.
learning. So being challenged there and then being challenged on the job. So it's no like one size fits all
Yeah,
solution
it's kind of
then.
like whatever you want. Like some people don't want to grow in their role or grow in their like
Well, they value stability,
right. They just want to
you
do what
know?
they've been doing and they're cool with it, which is like that's cool.
Right.
But like I guess I'm someone who can get bored easily. Like I
Yeah.
like to be challenged.
Right.
Also, I'm young, so like I
Yeah.
don't have like all these other major
Responsibilities kind
responsibilities
of pressing
outside of like
down.
my
Yeah.
9 to 5.
Yeah.
I don't have anyone to feed.
Well, you got to feed yourself.
Well, yeah, besides myself, obviously.
All right. So, do you have any recommendations for, let's say, someone's listening to the podcast that's like a sophomore or junior in college right now? Do you have any like advice or reflections that you would want to pass on to them?
I would say to explore like courses that maybe are not n- if you have the ability to explore courses that are outside of your major, just to see like what's out there to really try to get an idea of like what you want to do after college. Because like I really thought I wanted to be an actuary, and now looking back at it, I don't think that's something I could have done.
Really?
Hmm.
That is kind of cool because when you were in my class, like you kind of got your first exposure to real data and
Right.
and it sounds like I mean obviously like you enjoyed it to some degree, right?
Yeah, I did.
Um, very cool. What about it did you was the because I remember when I first got exposure to like real world data,
Mhm.
it stressed me out. I was like, this is not formatted correctly. It's not accurate. There's missing data. Like how
Right.
to clean that up. But it sounds like with your experience of it was like, oh, this is a challenge,
Yeah.
and this is new, and this is like I don't know. You're solving a problem that's not been specifically solved before.
Yeah, I think it's just like being able to, because I think there's a lot of like creativity when it comes to like looking at data, that a lot of people don't necessarily think because it's just like, oh, it's just like analytics, like very like technical. But I think there's a lot of creativity that goes into like looking at the data, and trying to like, gain insights from it because you do have to look at it from like all sorts of angles and even just the data cleaning process itself, which is kind of like the lengthiest process most of the time, I think you can learn a lot about the data with just like cleaning it. Um, and I don't know, I think it's just that iterative process of like, okay, here's the data, let's clean it, and then let's like visualize it and see what we can gain from it. Like, here are the questions that we have as a business. Just that there's a lot of freedom
Yeah,
to solving like problems when it comes to data.
yeah, that's true. And the position I'm in now, there's multiple ways that you could solve the problem,
Mhm.
but that is actually secondary. What the main thing is, it's almost like being a lawyer in court. Like you've got to be able to justify
Mhm.
what you're putting out there because like
Yeah.
they're not always gonna say, hey, this seems off, but they could at any time. So you've kind of got to like
Yeah.
be ready to justify whatever recommendation you're making.
Yeah, and I think you have to be ready also to look at back at your work and be like, "Oh, maybe I did make a mistake. Maybe I did look at something incorrectly or maybe I'm not looking at it through the proper
The
lens.
right lens, yeah.
And that's happened to me a lot at work. And sometimes like there's people in the organization who have experience and knowledge on a certain aspect or a certain channel, like in marketing, like with like direct mail or like print. Like I don't really know much about those
Those are like
things.
old school marketing, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's like the old school marketing. And so somebody might have a lot of knowledge on that, um, that I just simply don't, because I just don't know much about it. And so it's like if I'm presenting results and they're looking at it like, oh, that doesn't seem right, or like, are you, can you tell me more about this result? And if I can't really say much about it, then it's like, okay, maybe I have to go back and really question what the output is from this data set and
Right.
maybe bring somebody else in to be like, hey, what do you think about this?
So I've got a question for you. Because I'm one of these. Are you more of a big picture thinker or more of a detail person? Have you been asked this before?
I don't think I have.
Oh, that's
And
a good question
I'm
then.
not sure. I feel like I'm probably more, I would say like the small.
I was about to say my
Yeah.
understanding of you, or like at least what I've seen, you seem very detail oriented.
Yeah, I feel
To
like I'm more
where
detail.
I'm much more of a bigger, like I'm much more interested in the strategy aspect of it,
Okay.
and like less the kind of inner workings of like the algorithm. I'm like,
Okay.
is this right, or or the model that's
Right.
being built.
Right.
Like you like kind of building the model, right?
Yeah, and I get into the nitty-gritty of like
Right. I'm
what
like,
the model is
I would
doing.
like for someone to kind of build that out, and then
Mhm.
I can use it to then drive a business decision,
Mhm.
and then I like quantifying that. That's kind of like where I like to sit on things.
Okay.
Um, which kind of makes sense now as to why you're going much deeper into the technical stuff.
Mhm.
Because like you like, I mean, I wonder, it seems like we're just kind of wired differently, huh?
Maybe.
Like well, because like, do you remember why you thought it was a good idea to get a math degree? 'Cause from my perspective, I feel
Yeah.
like that seems like pulling teeth.
Because I really like math.
Really?
Yeah, that was just my thing. I was like, okay, I really like math and I'm good at it. So let me just do that.
See, I can remember in high school having a moment where I was like, I might have been trigonometry or something. I was like, I don't like this. I don't know
Oh,
if I can go further with this.
yeah.
Like, I don't know. Math felt overwhelming to me, especially when I was younger. But it sounds like your exposure to it,
Yeah, I've always
it
liked
was
it.
like more of like a curiosity inducing for you.
Yeah, I thought it was, I don't know, I just thought it was cool. Like, I just really liked math always,
Okay.
which is like really
Well,
nerdy.
what's cool about like just the fact that it's logic or fact based?
Yeah, and I think it's just like, I mean, I really like the way that it can explain
Yeah.
or that it, I guess it like parallels like nature in so many ways. Like that's one of the most interesting things about math to me, like the
Okay.
Fibonacci sequences, like like the number 108 of the universe. Just things like that like always fascinated me, and I think obviously when you're younger you can't understand like the actual like mathematical concepts. So then when you get into like college, you can
Start to explore
begin
that more.
to really understand these things, and I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting, and it just a lot of things kind of just clicked for me that maybe not everyone else like just gets it as easily just because
Oh yeah,
they
I was
probably
one of
don't have an
those.
interest in it. I think it takes an interest for it to be easier to learn. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's just interesting that like we're both in kind of the analytics, space, but we're two very different personality types.
Yeah.
Because I'm much more interested in like big picture. You know, I mean, I used to joke like when I was running social analytics, like a lot of the data visualization work, I would be like, this is bigger than this, so you should make this decision. It's
Yeah.
like basically making picture books for influential
Mhm.
adults. Like if I was being a little cutesy about like saying what I do.
Yeah.
But you're like, no, I want to like build out the algorithm and
Yeah.
get into AI and all this
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I mean, I think just being aware of that is valuable in that you can start to inform like like what's next? Like what I mean, are you thinking about getting to like more into like data science?
Um, I think my next step that I've been considering this year, I wanted to get a master's.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm considering a master's in AI. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
so
That's really
I
cool.
might do that. I might apply in June.
So tell
So
me more about is what man, I'm gonna sound like a boomer here. What is ChatGPT? Is that AI?
yes,
Okay.
yeah,
But and what is it doing exactly? I mean, I sound so dumb right now.
yeah. I mean, I guess it's just. I mean, at the end of the day, it is kind of just like a chatbot, because it's being trained on what input you're giving it, but also like obviously when they built it, it was trained on like all this data that we have.
So is it
So it's
like
just like machine learning.
it's like a series of nested ifs and statements? Is that what you're saying?
Sure.
Isn't that what like the joke is for AI?
Yeah. No, I mean, it goes a lot deeper than that, but yeah, I mean, it's just
Very cool.
kind of like an advanced chatbot.
Have you been on any of the episodes with Michael Galarnik?
I think so.
So he's studying machine learning for finance
Okay.
at Georgia Tech. So I need to connect you with him because he would be somebody. So are you thinking about getting a master's or he's doing a
No, a
PhD?
master's. I don't think
Okay,
I could do the
yeah.
PhD,
Well, because like
but
that
that might
is,
change.
but getting a PhD in like a practical space like that, I think is a really interesting concept because
Yeah,
you could teach, but then you could also go work for some type of trading company and build them an algorithm that's worth millions upon millions of dollars.
I guess. Yeah, that's always an option.
But all right, cool. Well, Christina, thank you for joining us. This has been really fun.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.